Welcome, everyone. Welcome. How are you all doing tonight? It's your host, Dhaiphong. Give me a quick sound check in the chat. I hope you all are doing well. As you're coming on, please do hit the like button. That helps boost the stream in the YouTube algorithm. Tends to be unfriendly to channels like this one. But in any event, I wanted to say welcome back. It's good to be back. We have a lot to cover today because it is absolutely just intense right now in world politics, in geopolitics. We are going to, of course, get to the story regarding Yemen, the major blow that Ansarallah hit upon Israel, struck upon Israel through the use of a drone that hit Tel Aviv right near the U.S. Embassy. We're going to get to the fallout because just a day later, on this day, July 20th, Israel bombed Yemen's Hodeidah port. I'm going to cover all of that and what the consequences of it will be. We're going to begin with Putin, Russia, Xi Jinping in China are preparing for nuclear war. Some people may quibble with the title, but they are readying nuclear war, not because they are doing it offensively, but they are reacting to major project provocations. We're going to get to that. And perhaps we will have time for another story, question and answer, and so many other things, including announcements. So let us get started. Everybody hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. If you're new to the channel, hit that notifications bell. Of course, the best way to support this channel monetarily is by going to the video description and subscribing as a paid annual member on Patreon at patreon.com/DannyHaiFong. That's where you can support this work. That's how you can make this work sustainable in the long term. Every amount is appreciated. Of course, if you do submit super chats or any other kind of payment during the stream, I will shout it out. Please do submit questions because there should be time at the end. But let us get started on this Saturday. It is Saturday, July 20th, and a lot is going on. So let us get started. All right. So here we go. Hit that like button as we move into the first story here. The NATO summit came and went at the beginning of July, around the second week of July. And of course, a lot was made about NATO's promises to provoke China and to build up on the Indo-Pacific quote unquote front. But the vast majority of the time spent at the NATO summit was talking, discussing, and planning for further war with Russia. And one of those plans that was announced was a missile deal, a deal between Germany and the United States that would see the U.S. Transferring nuclear capable missiles to Germany as of 2026. And Russia has taken very much to this as a threat. They have responded to this in a very big way. So Russia is very angry at NATO for announcing this, at the United States for announcing this deal. This is a NATO project to essentially reignite the Cold War against Russia that existed during the Soviet era, the era of the Soviet Union, where there was a nuclear arms race that almost led to the annihilation of the human race itself. And now we are back at it, and Russia is sending a stark warning to NATO, a stark warning to Germany, a stark warning to the United States that it will not be tolerated and that Russia itself is leaving everything on the table in terms of a possible response. So here is what Russia officially said in response to this announcement. Russia issues, according to Newsweek, a nuclear threat to NATO. A top Russian official has issued a nuclear warning to NATO just days after the U.S. announced it will be stationing developmental hypersonic weapons in Europe. When asked whether Russia could deploy nuclear missiles in response to Washington's plan to deploy long-range fire capabilities in Germany, Sergei Ryabkov, Russia's deputy foreign minister in charge of ties with the U.S., non-proliferation and arms control, told reporters in Moscow on Thursday that he does not rule out any options. The U.S. and Germany said in a joint statement published on July 10th, so this was during the NATO summit, that Washington will deploy longer-range missiles in Germany in 2026, including the SM-6 Tomahawk and developmental hypersonic weapons, which have significantly longer range than current land-based fires in Europe, they said. The U.S. and Germany said exercising these advanced capabilities will demonstrate the U.S. commitment to NATO and its contributions to European integrated deterrence. If representatives of the federal government of Germany consider it justified to begin some escalatory measures under the pretext of what we have in Kaliningrad region, then we will respond in terms of compensatory measures in a way that we consider most acceptable. Nothing is predetermined, including further escalation of the situation, said Ryabkov. Unfortunately, for now, the West, under far-fetched pretexts in search of reasons to attribute something to us again from the point of view of an encroachment of its security, is following precisely this escalation path. It's regrettable, but will not stop us from the point of view of solving problems and ensuring our security along the entire perimeter of Russia's borders, including, of course, in the zone of war in Ukraine. So that is what is happening. There is a major escalation going on. The U.S. is promising long-range missiles to Germany beginning in 2026 to build up a supposed deterrence to Russia. This is a nuclear threat because these missiles indeed could possess nuclear capabilities and hit from long ranges, meaning that Russia, and Russia has responded in kind, is saying that it will take any measures it needs to ensure its own security, which includes the nuclear option. And of course, Russia has been preparing for this for some time. But friend of the show, Scott Ritter, is an expert on this issue of arms control and the nature and character of the weapons in question, given his background as a weapons inspector, a former UN weapons inspector. And here's what he had to say to Sputnik. Okay, he gave this report to Sputnik just after Russia announced it's putting everything on the table as a response to NATO, to the United States, to Germany. And he's going to give you a rundown of what these weapons are, their capabilities, and what it means for the future of Russia-NATO conflict.
There are three systems in question that will be deployed. One is the SM-6 Dhaiphong missile, which has a surface-to-air capability and a surface-to-surface capability. The other is, of course, the ground-launched cruise missile, a variation of the Tomahawk sea-launched cruise missile that, since the U.S. withdrew from the INF Treaty, has now been adapted for firing from pods. And then, of course, there's the new Dark Eagle system. It's a hypersonic capable missile system that has recently been brought into service by the U.S. Army and now looks like it will be deployed to Germany. It's the Dark Eagle that is perhaps the most destabilizing. While it is not a nuclear capable missile, it is a system that has the ability to strike deep inside Russia with precision hypersonic warheads that are virtually impossible to intercept. This is an extraordinarily destabilizing development, and Russia has said it will respond. The specifics of a Russian response aren't known, but Russia did stop development or stop deployment of a intermediate capable system, the RS-26, back in 2017. And it's believed that Russia could bring this system back into operation and deploy it in short order. The RS-26 is a road mobile system that has the ability of carrying three avant-garde hypersonic warheads that are nuclear capable. Again, we've gone back in time. It's back to the 1980s, back to a situation where the United States and NATO and Russia once again face off with weapons that are inherently destabilizing. One mistake, one miscalculation, one misjudgment could lead to a situation where these missiles are fired in anger, and this would lead to the potential of a general nuclear exchange between the United States and Russia. The American and German decision to deploy the intermediate range capable systems into Europe is one of the most dangerous um, decisions that have been made by the U.S. and NATO in a season of dangerous decisions. It's irresponsible escalation that, unless it's reversed, can only lead to very tragic conclusions. It's deja vu all over again. We got rid of these weapons once. We made the world safer. The question is, can we do it again?
So that is what Scott Ritter had to say. I mean, that this is the thing. These weapons are indeed a major escalation. Just this promise itself could spiral into a nuclear exchange. And that is what Russia has been preparing for all along. Because remember, before this announcement was made, earlier in the summer, Russia, along with Belarus, were preparing nuclear drills. Of course, they were tactical nuclear drills. They weren't meant to be some kind of show of force that they would initiate a first use against a NATO country, anything like that. But they were a demonstration that both Russia and Belarus, given how close they are as partners, were looking to move up the escalation ladder, so to speak, when it comes to the nuclear question. And it's all in response to everything that has transpired up until this point. This conflict in Ukraine, this provoked conflict by the United States and NATO, the ways in which NATO has expanded all along Russia's border and has expanded further during this conflict with the admission of Sweden and Finland. And now you have this promise, right? Because in the first Cold War, Germany was one of the centers of where this arms race was occurring during the Cold War. The same goes for the rest of Europe during the proliferation of NATO, because NATO said that its job was to defend, quote unquote, democracy from the Soviet Union. And it did lead to this massive nuclear buildup, in particular in the United States. Now the United States is using Europe as its launching pad. And as you all have probably noted and seen in the Ukraine conflict, we are also witnessing Zelensky and NATO begging for the ability to strike deeper and deeper and deeper inside of Russia. All of this is connected. All of it is part of a larger plan and agenda of war with Russia. And war with Russia is inevitably a nuclear war. So that is why Russia is preparing for this nuclear war, and Germany is just following U.S. diktats. This is really a U.S. plan. This isn't a Germany plan on its own, although we cannot understate Germany's complicity and its willingness to bow down to Washington's diktats. But this is Washington's agenda. This is the United States using the NATO summit to make one of the most dangerous decisions in recent history to militarize and arm Germany with the capabilities of nuclear strikes, a possible nuclear proliferation with Russia. Now, it's not only Russia, though, where this is relevant, because the world of arms control, the world of de-escalation and reducing the potential of nuclear catastrophe in the world has only become more and more marginal as NATO not only sets its sights on Russia for war, but China too. Remember, China was called a decisive enabler of the conflict in Ukraine, of Russia in the conflict in Ukraine during the NATO summit. And now China has taken a very strong position on arms control. It has decided to halt talks altogether with the United States over Taiwan support. So remember, the just absolute disintegration of whatever was left of arms control occurred over the past year when Russia decided to just get rid of any restrictions to intermediate, missiles and exchanges. Now, China is doing the same thing. It is telling the United States it is not going to discuss nuclear arms control with the U.S. unless it halts its militarization and arms sales to Taiwan. So China said the U.S. weapon sales to Taiwan has compromised the political atmosphere for continued talks on nuclear non-proliferation. China suspended negotiations on nuclear non-proliferation and arms controls with the United States in protest against Washington's arms sales to the self-ruled island of Taiwan. The U.S. called Beijing's decision on Wednesday unfortunate, while analysts said the move deals a potentially serious setback to global arms control efforts. China and the U.S. began nuclear weapons discussions in November as part of a bid to ease mistrust ahead of a summit between President Xi Jinping and Joe Biden. Further dialogue has not been publicly announced since, with a White House official in January urging Beijing to respond to some of our substantive ideas on risk reduction. A spokesperson for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in China on Wednesday said the U.S.'s arms sales to Taiwan, a territory it claims had seriously compromised the political atmosphere for arms controls consultations. Consequently, the Chinese side has decided to hold off discussion with the U.S. on a new round of consultations of arms controls and non-proliferation, said Lin Jian. The spokesperson told a news briefing in China, in Beijing, the responsibility fully lies with the United States. The U.S. must respect China's core interests and create necessary conditions for dialogue. So you might be asking, well, why is this such a problem for China? Well, for one, this is a Ukraine situation for China, but it's even more severe than that because Taiwan, under international law, UN Resolution 2758, Taiwan is actually considered part of China because China, the People's Republic of China, is the only government representative of the nation of China. So to declare any kind of military support to Taiwan is in fact de facto recognizing it as some kind of independent entity. And that is something that China rejects altogether. But not only this, arming Taiwan is a direct provocation toward war. How can you have nuclear non-proliferation talks if the other side is literally just kilometers away from mainland China, essentially turning Taiwan into its own aircraft carrier, right? And you can see here, Republicans have admitted this. Taiwan is one of the largest buyers of U.S. arms. This is Republican lawmakers. And this is on July 17th. Two of them, Michael McCaul, U.S. Congressman, and China Hawk, who chairs the House Foreign Affairs Committee, said these comments, that it's one of the biggest buyers of American defense equipment, and reiterated U.S. support for Taiwan after he was asked about Donald Trump's interview with Bloomberg Business Week, in which the president said, or the former president said, that Taiwan should pay for its own defense. Taiwan is a perfect example of what we all want our allies to do. They've consistently been one of the biggest buyers of U.S. weapons for its defense. Okay, so that's what they are saying in the Republican majority Congress. And again, I just have to reiterate that this is a direct provocation toward war. But it's even worse than that in many respects, because this is essentially the United States using Taiwan as a proxy for a larger confrontation between the U.S. and China, because this isn't going to be fought between Taiwan and China. It'll be the U.S. and China, and that war will inevitably turn nuclear itself. This is what we all have to be aware of, that it's not just that Taiwan is receiving all of these arms. Mind you, the billions of dollars in backlogged weapons sales, arms sales alone, tallies upwards of 15 billion, 20 billion US dollars. These arms may never make it to the island, but they continue to feed the U.S. military industrial complex and continue to create, as China said, an atmosphere of war. So this is what is going on at the moment between Russia, China, and the United States. It is a disastrous situation in many respects, because what it portends is that there are now fewer and fewer talks being had between the biggest powers in the world, those powers that hold the most sway internationally on this huge question of nuclear non-proliferation. It died between the United States and Russia during the Ukraine war, during the US-NATO war provoked in Ukraine. And now it is being killed even further by the United States in its continued reckless actions with relation to Taiwan. If you read US corporate media, you will see them talk about China being aggressive. China surrounded Taiwan when Lai Ching-te became president of Taiwan. Well, why did they decide to hold military drills? It was because Lai Ching-te's inauguration address essentially called Taiwan an independent nation. That is a red line, and China was demonstrating that it will maintain and enforce its own security regime, its own security interests, just as Russia has done. So when I say that China and Russia are preparing for nuclear war, it is not a hyperbole. It is not hyperbole. It is not an exaggeration. It is China and Russia getting ready for what is inevitable unless the regime of the United States, its security and war making regime, is stopped. That is what Russia and China are trying to do, but they have to do it under the conditions with which they live and work, meaning that they are promising escalation and proliferation if these continued threats against them continue. Long range missiles to Germany, the ability for the United States to force and coax Germany into igniting that broader war with Russia, between NATO and Russia, is absolutely suicidal. It absolutely makes no sense from the standpoint of trying to garner any kind of stability in the world. With China, it's the same thing. Arming Taiwan makes no sense if the goal is stability, but the goal isn't stability. You heard what the Republican lawmaker said. They are happy that arms sales to Taiwan are so high because that means the arms dealers, the weapons manufacturers, the military contractors are making immense profits. But not only this, it also means that whatever options are on the table, some may criticize Russia for saying all options are on the table. But what do you think the United States and NATO have been doing? They've been putting all options on the table, including the nuclear option. This is why they keep refurbishing nuclear weapons. This is why they've gotten slower and slower in reducing the number and types of nuclear weapons under their disposal. This is why they are initiating missile agreements with NATO countries like Germany, really the top NATO country. This is why Europe is talking about a defense union. Over and over and over again, we are seeing Russia and China be provoked into taking fiercer and tougher steps and stances toward the unthinkable. And it's not that they're going to be the ones to first use. Of course, Russia has declared that it is willing to even test a nuclear weapon, a strategic nuclear weapon, if it is a NATO that refuses to bow down and step back and stop this escalatory path. But neither Russia or China have any kind of first use policy where they will use a nuclear weapon preemptively. That is not going to happen. But what will happen is that we will continue to go on this path from here on forward unless those doing the provoking, those in Washington, the neocons, those in the Biden administration, we may see a Trump administration. We don't know what exactly to expect there, but we can expect if 2016 to 2020 was any indication that there will be increased and continued aggression within Washington, whether you want to lay that on Trump or not. So this is the world that we live in. This is the situation that we are in. I wanted to introduce this today because I believe that we are much closer. Someone asked me, Danny, how close do you think we actually are to such a conflict? Well, right now, if you were to say, well, just what's in front of us, how close we are still not at the level of, well, the next move, the next mistake is going to lead to a nuclear exchange. But we are at the level where we don't know how fast any single error could lead to a monumental escalation toward nuclear war. All of the rudiments and the conditions are being laid for it to happen incredibly quickly. So I would say that the world is on the precipice. We know what the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists say. We are very close to midnight. and we have to take this very seriously. And we also have to understand why Russia and why China are taking the measures they are taking to ensure their stability, to ensure their peace as they move toward a multipolar world. All right, everybody, we are going to get to the next story. We are going to talk about Yemen now. And this is a story I have wanted to really cover because it is ongoing. It is something that is incredibly exciting in many ways, but it's, of course, also dangerous in many ways because it is what we have been talking about here in many respects, this possibility of a major regional conflict in West Asia launched because of Israel's genocide in Gaza. And now, of course, the Axis of Resistance is responding. So I'm going to pull up these sources, okay? Because this is a big one. This is a big one. This is a big story. There's a lot to it to cover. So I want to make sure that we are covered here. So stick around, everyone. I'm going to pull everything up. All right, here we go. And yeah, I mean, I didn't, I guess I should expect what happened because the Axis of Resistance, everyone makes it seem like the Axis of Resistance is not doing enough. A lot of people have said that to me. Danny, why aren't they doing enough? Well, let's be quite clear. The Axis of Resistance is doing a lot, and they just laid a huge blow to Israel. So let us get started on that. Keep hitting the like button, everyone. Keep hitting the like button. Keep hitting the notifications bell. That helps you know when I am live. Okay. And we will get started on this story. On July 19th, Ansarallah, the Houthis, as they are called in the collective West, in the U.S. warmongering sphere, Ansarallah laid a major blow to Israel's air defense systems, and really, you could say the entirety of its so-called military superiority, when it launched the Yafa drone, an unmanned aerial vehicle, into Tel Aviv, close to the U.S. Embassy, killing one Israeli and causing significant enough damage to warrant mass hysteria among those who are currently igniting the region on fire, from Israel, from the United States, the UK. They all have taken major umbrage with this move, and we're about to get to that. But before we do, I want to show you exactly what happened here. Okay, so this is the initial report. One Israeli died from Yemen's first drone strike on Tel Aviv. A total failure of the Iron Dome has worried the Israeli military. If Yemen can strike from 2,500 kilometers, then Hezbollah has the same capabilities. Indeed, that is a big concern. And here's another report on this. Okay, here's another report. It says from Hebrew sources, Israeli sources, estimated that the Israel that the so-called Houthi drone was in the air for approximately 10 hours during its flight from Yemen to Tel Aviv. It carries an explosive warhead weighing 10 kilograms, and there you see the drone as it was making its way into the area where it finally exploded. Now, this drone showed the whole world that not only is the Iron Dome penetrable, but Israel's entire military is just not capable of tracking this kind of technology from that entire distance. We're talking about not only Israel, but possibly so-called allies or even vassals, or those who are just completely wedded to Israel in some respects, even Saudi Arabia, we could say, given its stance on this issue, lip service on the one hand to the Palestinian cause, of course, and continue to collaborate with Israel in many respects. Yemen had to take a long road to launch this drone and to ensure that it exploded. So this was huge, and it incurred a vast response from Israel. Now, we're going to get to the response from Israel and then why this response is ultimately going to be a failure. So here we have what Israel did the day after, on July 20th. Israel attacks Yemeni civilian facilities while Sana'a vows a heavy price. So this is from Al Mayadeen. Their correspondent reports that civil defense teams continue to battle blazing fires that erupted due to Israeli aggression on oil storage facilities. So what ended up happening was Israel sent war jets to launch a series of military strikes on Yemen in the province of Hodeidah on the Red Sea coast. Israel is saying it was military targets. Yemen is reporting that there have been many martyrs, people who have died, as well as those wounded. We don't know, of course, their character. It's likely civilians have died in this, as is usually the case in anything Israel does. But it says the aggression targeted an oil refinery, leading to a massive fire that can be seen kilometers away. Al Mayadeen's correspondent reported that the airstrikes targeted the Ras Khatib power station in Hodeidah, igniting the oil storage facilities. The Yemeni Ministry of Health reported that martyrs and wounded were a result of the aggression, confirming that civilians suffered severe burns during the fire. Israeli Con 11 channel, citing a U.S. official, reported that Israelis conducted the attack on Yemen. And there you can see, I'm not going to play the video, but you can see the fires that occurred. So there are civil defense teams battling to extinguish the fire in flames, at noting that the size of the blaze is making that task very difficult. These airstrikes were coordinated between U.S. and Israeli forces, indicating the nature of the targets hit. Now, another report that's not here that is now, I don't know if it's confirmed or not, but Italy supposedly helped refuel the Israeli jets that were on the way, the F-35 fighters that were used to strike Yemen. And then what did Yemen say? They said, this is Mohammed Abdul Salam, head of Yemen's negotiating delegation, said that the brutal Israeli aggression will only increase determination and steadfastness of the Yemeni people and its brave armed forces in an escalating manner. And indeed, even before this strike, this is what Yemen was promising. Here is what the Ansarallah had to say. Okay. They said they are going to escalate operations and collaborate with the resistance on all fronts. It confirms its operation against the Israeli occupation will only escalate as long as the aggression on Gaza continues. So remember, this is about Gaza for Yemen. This is not about themselves. They're not going to let Israel deter them because of these airstrikes. Not only these strikes are not going to deter them because U.S. and Royal Navy strikes haven't deterred them, but it will only make their determination that much more steadfast. And you say, Danny, why? That seems suicidal. No, this is existential for Ansarallah. They see themselves as part of this entire war that's been going on. Remember, what has happened to Yemen over the last decade plus in genocide in and of itself, launched by the United States, supported by Israel, the UAE, Saudi Arabia being the leaders. Of course, Israel, not the leader necessarily. So is Saudi Arabia, UAE, the United States sponsoring them, and Israel being a major supporter of the destabilization and the destruction in Yemen, the hunger, the famine, these absolutely genocidal military operations. We can go on and on and on, but Yemen knows what this is like. They are coming to the defense of Gaza, now experiencing its own genocide. So, according to Yemen's Deputy Minister of Information, Yemeni escalation that targeted Tel Aviv is one that will lead to the military defeat of Israel, said Fahmy al-Yusufi. Speaking to Al Mayadeen, al-Yusufi remarked that the escalation is also a message directed to a NATO coalition that says Sana'a will not stand idly by as the enemy massacres Gaza. According to the Yemeni official, Yemen is escalating attacks deep into occupied territories, essentially targeting Israeli decision-making and subduing the occupation. Similarly, Ansar Allah Politburo member Hizam al-Assad told al-Mayadeen that the operation was the first among upcoming escalatory operations, adding that Israel should feel its head across all its cities, as what is to come is greater than what has been done as long as the aggression on Gaza continues. We are furthering a new strategic phase in operations against the enemy, noting that Yemeni armed forces are integrated with the resistance in Lebanon, Iraq, and Palestine. So they're promising more, and they have more at their disposal. Okay, this is another report. A source in the Yemeni armed forces reveals to Al Mayadeen Yemen will continue escalating in the face of Israel until it ceases aggression. It has a vast supply of those drones used on Tel Aviv. The drone Yafa, used in their fighter operation on Tel Aviv, was developed after Arab countries intercepted Yemeni weapons aimed at al-Rashrash, Eilat, an informed source told Al Mayadeen. The source further stated that the stockpile of such drones is very large and emphasized that this is not the last weapon of its kind, noting that American reports about intercepting these drones are inaccurate. The source highlighted that military operations on occupied Yafa are coinciding with naval operations according to objectives announced by the Yemeni army, affirming all operations will continue unabated. So Yafa, remember, this is what they're calling Tel Aviv before the formation of Israel, okay? That's why they called it that. The source explained that the Yemeni Armed Forces statement revealed complete readiness for changes, emphasizing that the operation is part of escalatory steps that will not be reversed. They are not going to reverse it, okay? The operation in question was conducted by the newly developed Yafa drone. Yemeni spokesperson Brigadier General Yahya Saree declared early Friday the drone is named after the Palestinian city occupied by Israel, now known as Tel Aviv. The UAV is designed, the unmanned air vehicle is designed with the specific aim of evading enemy radar and interception systems, Saree said. The drone reached its target and achieved its operational objectives. Okay? It emphasized that the Yemeni armed forces now consider the area of Tel Aviv to be a strike zone and a primary target for future operations. So, again, Israel, you fucked around. Now you are finding out. Yemen is absolutely not going to stop what it is doing. All right. It's not going to stop. And why? What would give anyone that impression? This has been going on since November 2023, when Ansar Allah stepped up, joined in with the Axis of Resistance, and instituted that blockade in the Red Sea that has devastated the Israeli economy and has coincided with the ongoing fighting between Hezbollah in the south of Lebanon against Israeli forces there. It coincides, of course, with what is happening in Palestine and in Gaza, and it coincides with the overall resistance from Iran in Operation True Promise. And we can go on and on and on with how the resistance has been coming together to come to the aid of Palestine. Now, I want to show you that this is, of course, not just a military affair. The Red Sea blockade has already caused bankruptcy for Eilat Port, the port that has received absolutely no economic activity or has been really just completely frozen since Yemen, since Ansar Allah has began its campaign. So this is according to the Middle East Monitor. What happens? It officially declared bankruptcy, 8 months of complete paralysis of commercial activity and a cessation of receiving ships and containers, especially coming from Asian country markets, carrying with them the needs of the economy and the industrial sector. This includes raw materials, intermediate goods, production inputs, machinery and equipment, crude oil and fuel, wheat, food, cars, and other market needs. So, the reason for the bankruptcy was successive attacks launched by Ansar Allah on Israeli ships in the Red Sea and the Arabian Sea, as well as targeting of ships in countries supporting the occupation and the genocidal war it is waging against the people of Gaza, notably American and British ships. So, shipping traffic declined 85% over this period, basically altogether stopped. And that is why there's bankruptcy in Eilat. That is a major achievement from the resistance, from Ansar Allah itself, and it only points to run front. So now, and I'm going to show you what I've been saying about this because I think it is a point that should be made. So now we have one country. One country. All right, I'm going to show you what I mean by this. One country has declared, a massive number of people in that country have declared that they are now at war with Israel. They are stepping up their resistance. And I said, yes, sure, Israel can do something like this. It can burn Hodeidah. It can cause damage. It can kill civilians. It can further hamper Yemen's economy. But what they cannot stop is this. They cannot stop the people that support Ansarallah. They cannot stop the people who back Ansarallah's efforts. And they cannot stop Ansarallah because if they could, that drone would have never hit Israel. Not only that, but if we can expect this to get worse and worse for Israel. So over the last several months, we've heard Israel say that it will, and we heard it after its strike on Yemen, that, oh, you will pay the price if you attack us. Well, it's Israel that's actually paying a pretty steep price because it is quickly finding itself mired and surrounded by resistance. So here is Hezbollah on the Lebanon front. This just happened July 19th. Israeli officer succumbs to wounds from Golan attack as Hezbollah strikes new settlement. Okay, an Israeli officer died from wounds sustained from a Hezbollah attack in the occupied Golan Heights 2 weeks ago. So this happened actually earlier in July, and it's an update. And it said it attacked a new Israeli settlement on Friday for the first time. Retired officer Ephraim Ben Amram, 25, a soldier in the 53rd Battalion, died of his wounds about 2 weeks later after he was seriously injured in a drone attack launched in the south of Lebanon on a military base in the Golan Heights. Remember, what are the Golan Heights? They are Syrian territory occupied by Israel. At least 19 Israeli troops were injured at the end of June when Hezbollah launched a suicide drone attack on the territory, a Syrian plateau occupied by Israel since 1967. You heard that. Occupied by Israel. Israel does not belong there, yet they are there, okay? As of Wednesday, Israel said 682 of its soldiers have died and more than 4,100 have been injured since the start of the war in Gaza and outbreak of hostilities along the Lebanon frontier. Now, you may think that is small, but most people understand that IDF numbers are likely fabrications, and actually the casualty numbers are probably much higher. While we cannot confirm this, we do know that the fierce fighting, the reason why Israel will not step up their operations against Hezbollah is because they know that whatever Yemen can do, Hezbollah can do to an even greater degree. So an Israeli airstrike destroyed a 3-story building in the south of Lebanon, killing 5 people as of Thursday evening. So this was Thursday, July 18th, including a commander of Hezbollah's elite Redwan operational unit. The commander was identified as Ali Jafar Matuk. A second Hezbollah member was killed, identified as Hassan Ali Mana. So this is what's been happening. They've been killing Hezbollah leaders, Israel. And then Hezbollah strikes back. And Hezbollah is striking back in a pretty fierce way. It has completely emptied out the north of so-called Israel, okay? And we can see Hezbollah rocket attacks this back in early July, spark fires and destroy thousands of acres, okay? I think there might be a better picture here. There it is. All right. There is the scene of what northern Israel has looked like earlier this month, earlier the month of July. So you have Israel completely tied up in the Lebanon front. Okay, Israel does not have the capabilities to wage a broader war with Lebanon without being bombarded, right? I've shown that Israeli media itself has said that 1,000 missiles will rain on the head of Tel Aviv from Lebanon should Israel try to wage a larger war there. So you have the Lebanon front, okay? And I'm not even going to get into the Syrian and Iraq Islamic resistance, which is in and of itself significant too. But not only do you have Israel now being just drawn in, right? It is now entrapping itself into a larger regional war with Yemen, a small country that has been impoverished, that has been at war for years with Saudi Arabia and the UAE and the United States, completely decimated, but built up this incredible resistance force with all of its fierce and might and courage and now capability. So Israel is now getting deeper and deeper into conflict with Yemen. It's already mired in a conflict with Hezbollah that it keeps on threatening it's going to expand. But there's one big problem for Israel, and that is that it is being embarrassed. It is being absolutely exposed as a fraud when it comes to the war in Gaza. This is what has to be noted. The Jerusalem Post itself, this is from back in May. This is what is so, I think, just emblematic of what Israel is right now. Israel is a state on the path of suicide. It's a colonial entity on the path toward its own destruction. But isn't that how they all go? Right? So, this larger regional war that is being sparked, that Yemen has just courageously stepped up to the plate over, this is Israel's grave that it is digging. Jerusalem Post says Israel has lost the war on Gaza. Israel has lost its war on the besieged Gaza Strip and failed to achieve its declared goals of the war, including eliminating Hamas and returning all the hostage, said Jerusalem Post. Remember, this is back at the end of May, and a damning critique of the occupation's far-right government. In an article published on Tuesday, this was back in late May, the newspaper said that even seizing and occupying the city of Rafah, which it claimed hides dozens of huge tunnels used by Hamas to smuggle weapons, ammunition, weapons, and vehicles, will not achieve these goals. It added that Hamas won on October 7th when its fighters embarrassed the much vaunted Israeli military establishment, invaded military bases, killed many Israelis, and returned to Gaza with hostages. The movement, it pointed out, continues to be a force in Gaza despite destruction caused by the Israeli army. According to Israel's biggest circulation English language daily, established in 1932 as the Palestine Post, only changing its name in 1950, the most significant victory achieved by Hamas has been to put Palestinians back on the international agenda after years of neglect, making Israel a pariah in the world again, and endangering the grand U.S. plan of forging an alliance between Israel and so-called moderate Arab nations. Does it make sense for Israel to continue pressing for the achievement of unachievable goals, or should it shift gears and work towards something attainable? Asked the newspaper. If the answer is the latter, Israel needs new leadership. So this is what Israel is trying to do. They are trying to paint, right? The Israeli establishment is trying to say this is Netanyahu, that he's an extremist. And all those things are true. Netanyahu is indeed a disaster. He's indeed a warmonger, a war criminal, and at the heart of what is going on in Gaza, that genocide. But it is the entire Israeli establishment. We cannot act like Yoav Gallant and these forces now saying that they are opposed to what Netanyahu is doing, are somehow benevolent, are somehow having anyone's interests at heart but their own. They are looking at their own self-preservation first and foremost. And that's what we have to remember, because what we are witnessing here is quite historic. We are witnessing the axis of resistance. Many U.S. observers, Western observers will say, this is all Iran, this is all Iran. But Iran, you can see, is very far away from these operations, no matter how much military aid Iran might give to, let's say, Hezbollah or even Ansarallah. It cannot and does not dictate all of their operations, or any of their operations for that matter. We are seeing Ansarallah take a very just monumental step toward a major escalation, which Ansarallah and the people of Yemen see as absolutely necessary to ensuring the survival, not just of the Palestinian people, not just of themselves and the rest of the axis of resistance, but really for the entire region and the world. We cannot underscore that this, or understate, or just minimize what it means to step up in this moment where so many countries cannot or do not. Remember, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, these countries that all run along the Red Sea as well, right? They have done absolutely nothing. Actually, Saudi Arabia has been re-provoking conflict with Yemen, has been escalating sanctions onto Yemen to try to starve them out. Why? Many people believe it's because it's at the behest of Israel. These countries, of course, have long histories of being essentially CIA cutouts themselves. But in this day and age, where multipolarity is taking hold, where countries like Saudi Arabia are diversifying their international portfolio, saying that they are making bets on BRICS, on China, on Russia, they still have not done anything to the degree that is necessary to step up to the plate for Gaza. Instead, it is the axis of resistance that is doing so. In Yemen striking Israel, it is incredible to hear that Yemen has the capabilities not just to penetrate the Iron Dome, but to do it over and over and over and over again. Israel is going to think many times over about what it just did by bombing Hodeidah. They think that they have scared Yemen-ISRAEL into giving up. They think that what they did is damage enough to ensure that these kind of operations won't continue. Nothing over the last almost a year now, nothing over the last 7+ months says anything of the sort. What has Yemen been doing? It has been hitting ship after ship after ship after ship. It has been diverting economic activity. It has played a huge hand in Israel's economic ailments. It has been making some of the biggest impact in this conflict that any other force has been making outside of the Palestinian resistance. And so now Israel picking a direct fight with Ansarallah only ensures that its destruction will come sooner rather than later. That is what it ensures, because you can't defeat the people. You cannot defeat a resistance. You can't name a resistance that has been defeated. You can name a resistance that has been held back, that has been pushed back, that has faced challenges. But over the course of history, if you look at this kind of resistance and where it falls, whether you're looking at Vietnam or even Afghanistan kicking out the United States. But if you look at countries like Vietnam, if you look at countries like Korea, we can go on and on and on. There's so many examples where resistance such as this leads ultimately to victory. And given the capabilities, right? These are capabilities that are serious, given Yemen's capabilities, given Hezbollah's capabilities, given Iran. Forget for just Iran alone. Iran takes a very measured position when it comes to Israel because it does not want to see a bloodbath in the region. It has the ability to ignite that. It has the ability to bring Israel to its knees if it wanted to, but it doesn't. Why? Because an attempt to do so would, if in fact, engender an absolutely devastating war that would bring everyone else in the crosshairs. It isn't as if Iran and Israel share a border. This would bring in the entire axis of resistance. It would bring in the entire region. We would see a war that would also bring in the United States. And who knows what kind of carnage could come out of that. That is the only reason why Iran hasn't done more than what it has, which has been quite significant in a lot of respects. This is why the axis of resistance as a whole has taken a measured escalatory approach. Yes, the sacrifice has been big, but now we are seeing the fruits being born, and we will continue, I believe, to see more and more attacks on Israel to come. More and more will be coming because at the end of the day, we are talking about a colonial entity. We are talking about a genocide committed by this colonial entity that has no end in sight. And the axis of resistance understands this. And most of the world at this point understands this. Netanyahu will come to Congress the 24th of July, and he will give a speech talking about how he basically runs the show, how his country's interests, his occupation forces' interests are the most important interests, and that the United States needs to do what it's been doing, which is essentially giving everything that it needs to commit absolute wanton war, criminality, genocide, and massacres. That's what he is going to do. And that is why the axis of resistance is taking these measures to stop it. Now, the axis of resistance obviously needs more help. That help will have to come in the form of people in the collective West, people in the United States saying no more to this genocide and actually putting in a concerted effort and action to stop it from happening. What does that look like? Well, you can let me know in the comments. You can let me know what it may look like. wherever you can comment in this video, in this live stream, if you're watching it live. All right, everybody. That is that story. It's a very just a lot to it, and it's amazing. It's amazing to see people stand up. It is some of the most beautiful, it's beautiful. And I have one more story, and then I am going to open it up for the question answer period. All right. We're going to talk more about China. We're going to talk more about war. It's being built up with China. Okay. Actually, hold on. Let me or should we do Ukraine? Because I have a Ukraine story too. Maybe I can take it to the polls. Ukraine 1, China 2. I might do Ukraine, actually. Um, hmm. I don't know. What do you guys think? China. People are saying China. Some people are saying Ukraine. Let's do China. Let's do China. Okay. Let's see if I can get these sources up before I start. Stick around, everybody. Stick around. Here we go. Here we go. Why is this looking like this? All right. Let's get started. Here we go. China is preparing for war with the United States, but it's not just the United States at this point. It is NATO as well. NATO has put China under or within its crosshairs, under its auspices of war. We saw at the NATO summit, not just a joint communique, reference China as the decisive enabler of Russia's so-called war in Ukraine, which is really a NATO proxy war, but also it invited members of the Indo-Pacific, aka the Asia Pacific, which is what the region actually calls it, like Japan, like South Korea. It brought these countries in order to show China that it is building a kind of alliance with these countries against China. Now, China has responded. And that response came right after the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit around the same period, right? Just before the NATO summit, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization met and admitted Belarus. And now you might say, okay, well, what does that have to do with anything? Well, right after the summit, right after Belarus was admitted to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, China and Belarus launched drills at the same time of the NATO summit, military drills that NATO said were occurring right under their nose. And so I've reported on these drills, but a new set of information has come in about the nature of them right under NATO's nose, says Eurasia Times. Chinese soldiers practice seizing enemy airport in war drills with Belarus. Chinese and Belarusian troops have conducted a joint exercise simulating the capture of an airport near the border with Poland and Ukraine as part of their bilateral exercise dubbed Eagle Assault. Held near the city of Brest, which is close to Poland and just 28 kilometers from Ukraine, the joint anti-terrorist training exercise marked the first time Chinese troops participated in training on Belarusian soil. According to the Belarusian Defense Ministry, the exercise began on July 15th and concluded July 19th. On July 18th, the Defense Ministry of China provided a detailed account of the exercise, praising troops for their excellent technical and tactical skills, rigorous training standards, and robust fighting spirit. Wang Bo, the Chinese commander, emphasized successful practice of military tactics, noting that the exercise encircled, controlled, and pursued targets as well as refined reconnaissance and blockade tactics. On July 17th, the joint air-ground combat exercise simulated an operation to seize control of an airport from terrorists using drones, paratroopers, and ground forces. So this is important to note because some may see, hey, well, they're practicing capturing airports. This is mainly a counterterrorism operation. Of course, they're not going to frame these exercises as an offensive operation against NATO itself. Counterterrorism is extremely important in the region. We saw what happened at the Crocus City Music Hall, right? We saw what happened there inside of Russia. We know that a lot of this region, especially in the Caucasus region, there is a proliferation of armed groups, largely because of U.S. policy and largely because of the consequences of the fall of the Soviet Union. But I digress. The point here is that China and Belarus are preparing for that, but in turn, they're really preparing for how they coordinate in all fields of war, including this ongoing provocations from NATO. The Chinese Defense Ministry's report noted that the exercise proceeded smoothly due to seamless coordination, solid training, and a high level of trust between Chinese and Belarusian forces. The joint drill was announced shortly after Belarus became the Shanghai Cooperation Organization's 10th member. This month has seen additional Chinese military engagements in Belarus, including participation of the People's Liberation Guard of Honor in a military parade in Minsk on July 3rd, commemorating the 80th anniversary of Belarus's liberation. Belarus is a staunch supporter of Moscow's war efforts since Ukraine began in 2022 of February. It's even hosted Russian tactical nuclear weapons on territory, underscoring its close alignment with Russia. China, while calling for peace talks with Ukraine and Russia, has not condemned the invasion. And of course, the NATO summit said that there's profound concern over its partnership with Russia. So that is what happened. Okay. That is a major development in and of itself. But you might ask yourself, okay, why is it that China is now getting closer with Belarus on the military front? Because it's not just this common understanding that they have. It's also because it goes beyond multipolarity. It goes into existential survival in many respects because Belarus and Russia, they coordinate around nuclear weapons drills. They have been since the summer of 2024, even before this. They have been stationing weapons in Belarus, Russia has, and now they have conducted drills, and those are going to continue. And China hasn't condemned them. China has gotten closer to Belarus. This is about coordinating the defense of the multipolar world beyond the development of the multipolar world, right? You need strong defense, and they are building that defense. And one of the reasons why it's important to have a strong defense, it's important to have strong multilateral defense partnerships. They're not going to call it military alliances, but it's because there is a literal, right? There is a literal war being built up at the biggest level. I'm going to show you. I talk a lot about backlog of arms to Taiwan. I just want to show you the scale, right? So this is just from April 2024. I'm going to show you the graph of where it's about 20 billion US dollars. This is the backlog. This is what Republicans hail as absolutely incredible. Of course, friends of the show like Brian Berletic, Scott Ritter would talk about how a lot of these arms are not going to see combat. A lot of these arms are probably worthless, but nonetheless, they are war provocations. And so you see munitions, asymmetric warfare, traditional military aid. We have about $20 billion worth of weapons backlog. That about stays roughly the same. And the reason why April 2024 is significant is because it was the most recent arms sale to Taiwan by the United States. So this is why there is a push to build actual partnerships. The multipolar world, led by Russia and China, they see what's happening in Ukraine. They see it. That's why the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, while not a military alliance, is fast becoming concerned with security. It's why, right after the Shanghai Cooperation Organization occurred, China and Belarus launched these drills. It wasn't just a coincidence. It wasn't just, hey, let's just do this because, hey, we're already talking. We already were just hanging out at a summit. No, it's because defense, security is becoming more and more prominent. Not some kind of military alliance to wage war on NATO. It is about building a stronger relationship militarily along multilateral partnerships and bilateral partnerships, which will make it that much more difficult for the US and NATO to do the unthinkable. Because I say it all the time on this channel, they are capable of doing the unthinkable. We cannot trust neocons, warhawks. It doesn't matter, Trump. And I'm going to show you why the United States is getting more and more concerned with Trump in so many respects. But we are seeing, we are seeing the fact that no matter who is elected, all right, no matter who is elected to the United States presidency, this will likely continue. When Trump was elected the first time, he escalated with China. You can say, well, his team, Pompeo, China hawks, all of this. Yes, true. But Trump went along with it. Trump reinforced the rhetoric. Biden came in and did it just went even harder, both rhetorically and policy-wise. So the whole world is seeing this. The whole world is seeing Ukraine. The whole world is seeing what's happening in the Asia Pacific. The world is watching the United States and NATO burn the world to the ground, and they do not want any part of it. So now we have a situation, though, which I find very interesting. Donald Trump, and this is the difference, right? You have the NATO summit on the one hand, and you have a chaotic political situation where Donald Trump is essentially making statements which are sending alarm bells throughout the political establishment, mainly the hawks in Washington. So I want to show you, Foreign Policy Magazine said this about what Trump had to say about China. Okay, Trump is giving Taiwan, the Ukraine treatment. And what's so interesting about this is that Donald Trump's first presidency was largely characterized by the sending of the US-China relationship into the darkest days. There were times in July of 2020, during the height of the pandemic, that people thought that China and the US were very close to a shooting war in the South China Sea. Now Trump has been giving different statements. Of course, I caution trust in statements from US politicians on the issue of war and peace. But nonetheless, it shows that there is an impact that the actual capabilities of the multipolar world have on the US and its hegemonic political position. There's an impact. There's a response. I believe Trump, in his statements, while I don't trust them necessarily, I don't believe the foreign policy establishment can be reeled in without stronger stuff. Trump's comments, I believe, are an admission of a new era in the political and geopolitical order. So here is what they had to say. Trump's transactional approach to Taiwan sets him apart from China hawks advising him. The Republican Party platform released ahead of this week's Republican National Convention contained capitalized words like God's good grace, American patriots, but none of them were Taiwan. It was a striking departure from the party's track record for the island and left many guessing where Donald Trump stands on Taiwan heading into the second term. But he filled in that blank in Bloomberg with Bloomberg Businessweek's interview with him. In the interview, conducted in late June, he cast doubt on future U.S. support for Taiwan. Asked whether the United States would come to Taiwan's defense in the event of a Chinese attack, he answered rather elliptically, saying, Taiwan, I know the people very well, respect them greatly. They did take about 100% of our chip business, referring to high-end semiconductors, the vast majority of which are currently made in Taiwan. That's an interesting statement. I don't think Trump understands the supply chain issue there. And I don't think he understands that actually the fact that TSMC produces these chips and is mainly more U.S. aligned. But of course, it does, Taiwan and the mainland have a relationship around these chips. But the point here is that it's probably benefited the United States' tech sector to have Taiwan be such an engine of the semiconductor industry. In any event, he went on to suggest that the answer would be conditioned on whether defending Taiwan would be a good deal economically for the U.S. Taiwan should pay for its defense. We're no different than an insurance company. Taiwan doesn't give us anything. So Taipei's representative in Washington defended the island's efforts in a statement to foreign policy, saying, as the threat of military coercion increases, Taiwan is doing its part by actively strengthening deterrence capabilities with the support of the U.S. under the Taiwan Relations Act. Taiwan's comments undoubtedly set off new concerns in Taipei, but he has made statements in similar vein over the past 2 years. So, okay, I don't want to keep going. He's been talking about giving Taiwan the Ukraine treatment because they're already freaking out about Ukraine. And they should be, because it's not that Trump is going to be some kind of peace and liberator, right? He's not going to come in and just completely end everything. That should have been proven in 2016 when all of the conditions were there for him during his campaign to get closer to Russia. And even though there were some efforts and attempts made, like the Helsinki summit, overall the policy got worse with Russia. You could say there was a lot of pressure behind him, the neocons, the hawks, all over the Russia hawks. Yes, that is true. But at the same time, that dynamic is not going to simply cease to exist. But they are worried, and they should be worried, because this is a shift that is happening. That shift that is happening is that not only is the United States looking at the overall situation with China as the biggest threat to its so-called military and economic supremacy in the world, but China is responding in ways that only help its own stability, right? So China is being a very rational actor here. It is not only preparing for war like the Belarus drills portend, it is not only building up its own military arsenal, its own nuclear arsenal. It has hundreds of nuclear warheads. It is going to build more now that nuclear non-proliferation is off the table with the United States. So not only is it preparing for war in the more traditional aspects, but China, as always, has been preparing for war in a very asymmetric manner, one that could be characterized as strengthening China. China has been just absolutely beleaguered in the Western mainstream media. It just finished its CPC plenum conference where it met to discuss the economy and the overall direction of Chinese society moving forward, geopolitically, economically, socially, everything. And I want to show you what CNN had to say about it, because I don't think they understand that the own words coming out of their mouths demonstrate that China has a clear vision, right? While we have Donald Trump saying one thing and J.D. Vance saying another. J.D. Vance said China is the biggest threat. Trump is saying, well, maybe Taiwan should pay more. Maybe we should pull back. Maybe we will only defend Taiwan from China if it makes sense for the United States. J.D. Vance is saying, wait. Let's go all in on China. Russia should not be our enemy. China should be. So while there's this political turmoil around the U.S.'s global position, while there's an internal disagreement that will likely inevitably lead to a uniformity in policy, because there really is only one war party in the United States, But then these internal disagreements matter because it demonstrates that there's one force in the world, the multipolar world, which is moving towards stability and moving towards security, moving toward its own self-preservation and preparing for this war that the United States is building up, launching, and really in the process of. You have China here we are being told that China is not addressing any of its own challenges. It's not moving towards stability. It's a basket case economically. It's about to collapse. But China is waging an asymmetric war, meaning that it is not simply readying for the defense of its country through military means. It is also preparing to be such a stable, such a unified society, a society that can withstand headwinds, as they call them in China, that can defend itself. So CNN said there were few clues in the CPC plenum on how to tackle a worsening downturn, but I'm just going to read what this actually says, okay? Long-term reform plans. So no clues, right? We have no clues on what China is going to do. But then the third plenum names high-quality development as China's top priority and laid out carrying out structural reforms by 2029. Beijing has been pushing self-sufficiency in core technologies as the United States and its allies curb the exports of key products like advanced chips to China. It also views technological innovation as a new growth engine that could help the economy transition from the old model fueled by infrastructure investment and debt expansion. So technological self-sufficiency is a priority. So we were told in the beginning of this article at the headline that China has no idea what it's going to do about its economy. It gave no clues about it. And now they're telling you the exact opposite, that they're going to move toward technological self-sufficiency. If that Microsoft outage around the world didn't show you that, that is quite useful for China because they were not affected by the Microsoft outage. In any event, policymakers also pledged to improve people's livelihoods at the plenum, essentially a continuation of Xi's common prosperity agenda. While previous post-Mao China leaders were content to let some get rich first, Xi appears to believe the time has come to share the fruits in China's development among its population. This is arguably one of the most promising parts of the war agenda, said Evans Pritchard. He must be some expert they talked to. But Evans Pritchard here says that it's arguably one of the most promising parts of the reform agenda, since channeling a greater share of income to households would help to advance a much needed balance toward consumption. The leadership also vowed to revamp fiscal taxation and financial systems, which signal their concerns about how to address debt crises faced by local governments. So essentially, they are looking to institute a more fair society. Okay. Julian Evans Pritchard is the head of economics at Capital Economics. So that's who they talked to for this article. In any event, there were clues there. Technological self-sufficiency, improving people's livelihoods. There's more than that. I'm going to show you from the Chinese side what they're saying about what happened at the plenum. But this is its own kind of warfare. Geopolitics is not just about military to military conflict. It's not just about diplomatic, bilateral, multilateral relationships. It's also about what are these countries doing? What is China doing? It's not just sending troops to Belarus to conduct incredibly provocative, in many ways, to NATO, in NATO's perspective, military drills. It's also about taking care of your own, taking care of your home. Geopolitical analysts, or so-called, like Peter Zeihan, have no idea about this. They don't understand it. They've never been to China. They've never been. They don't understand it. They don't understand what's going on. They don't understand that all of their collapse theories are going to disintegrate in the wind, right? They're going to become just absolutely worthless over time. Just ask Gordon Chang how serious he's taken. He's simply just a Fox News mouthpiece, a pundit. No one takes him seriously unless you watch Fox News and just believe anything on Fox News, just like believing anything on any mainstream media source, right? No one. Gordon Chang, he wrote a book about China's coming collapse. How many years has it been? Years, over a decade now, and we're still waiting. So here are the key takeaways. This is according to, of course, take it with a grain of salt as you wish, but this is what the Chinese government had to say from the CPC Central Committee plenum. So these are the goals. Finish building a high standard socialist market economy in all respects. Further improve the system of socialism with Chinese characteristics. Generally modernize the system and capacity for governance. Basically realize socialist modernization. So what are these goals? So working toward, right? What are the focuses? So building that market economy, building whole process people's democracy, what they call their governance system, building a strong socialist culture in China, raising people's quality of life, building a beautiful China. What does that mean? It means greening China, planting trees, right? Reforestation is a huge thing in China. Still combating pollution, especially in new industrial centers over and over. So advancing peaceful China initiative to a higher level, improving parties' capacity for leadership and governance. So this is what it means. Okay, here, this is just, there's so many points here, but it says some highlights of the reform measures: higher standard opening up. It will launch, staunchly adhere to international economic trade rules, and steadily expand institutional opening up to develop new institutions for a higher standard open economy and translate its vast market into significant opportunities for the world. Peaceful development. Independent foreign policy of peace will be pursued. It calls for equal and orderly multipolar world and universally beneficial and inclusive economic globalization. And China will participate in efforts to lead reform and development of the global development system. Financial reforms. Macroeconomic governance system will be improved. Efforts to deepen reform of the fiscal and financial systems, as well as enhance fiscal policy consistency. New quality productive forces. This means just stepping up innovation, essentially. Stepping up innovation, higher technology, higher levels of development. Private enterprises will create a favorable environment to offer more opportunities for private enterprises, says China, and enhance mechanisms for private companies to participate in major national projects. Monopoly sectors. China will advance the market-oriented reforms in monopoly sectors with industries such as energy and railways. Green development, talent conservation, real estate market. So it's going to address the real estate market, which they always say is just in such a downturn. But we have to understand also that the real estate market in China is very expensive in the big cities, and some of this is being allowed. Sounds crazy, right? To allow the real estate market to become more affordable. Just blow some people's minds who don't understand what it means to build a society that's not just for private investors, not just for hedge funds, not just for military contractors like the United States does it. So in any event, China is waging a kind of asymmetric warfare. That asymmetric warfare is a path towards stable development, making itself sanctions proof, right? That's something that many countries have learned from Russia's experience. China has been doing this and accelerating that process over the course of the Ukraine conflict, building up its technological self-sufficiency, building up its economic self-sufficiency, and now building military partnerships that will sustain its security for the long term. Many people think that China, and this includes Russia, do not do enough on the military front, do not do enough to hit back at NATO in the United States. And I would argue that this is an incorrect analysis, an incorrect conclusion. And why would I argue this? It's because there are more ways to fight a war, more ways to fight back against war provocations than going tit for tat, than essentially employing the same means as your adversary or as that which has made you the adversary, right? Many more ways. One way is to just continue on your own path, ensure that you have the security necessary to continue on it. But there is a meme, okay? And I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you this meme that has gone around, okay, social media for quite some time. I've seen my friend Carl Ja post this many times. So here's the meme, okay? Do nothing and win. Microsoft outage leaves China largely touched as tech self-sufficiency campaign pays off. Do nothing and win. Essentially, though, China's doing something, right? To make itself recession-proof, to make it so it doesn't, so it didn't feel the impact of the 2008 crisis to make it so it didn't go through a Microsoft disastrous outage for a day that crippled businesses and airlines and hospitals. My wife's hospital was affected by that outage. But in order to make this happen, it's not just doing nothing. The meme makes sense because China is not fighting back. China is not embracing some kind of new anything. China is just doing what it's been doing nothing, doing what it's been doing, and increasing its stability, increasing its independence, its self-sufficiency, and becoming that leader of the multipolar world that the US is so afraid of. And so that is where this war is being taken by China. The United States and NATO, of course, have other plans. Their plans are to build up in the Pacific, to expand NATO's auspices into a region that completely falls out of its auspices. Larry Johnson, the former CIA analyst, said on DD Geopolitics that there used to be a Southeast Asian treaty organization, SEATO, that was established directly after the Chinese Revolution, right, by the United States as a kind of alternative NATO. That was dismantled when the United States was ousted from Vietnam. NATO may be over. NATO may be finished. If it picks a war with China, it will be finished. But on the Russia war front, NATO's not doing too well. So all of these provocations, China is understanding NATO as a paper tiger, but is making the preparations anyway to ensure that it has the stability, the development, and the capacity to ride the wave toward its own goals. And therefore, one of those is a multipolar world, assume that leadership, and build a more stable world. That is what I would call a knockout blow, a game-changing way of fighting back against just disastrous and dangerous provocations from Washington and, of course, its NATO arm. With that said, everybody, that is all for the stories today. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to do some thank yous. So, first of all, thank you to all the Patreon members who decided to come out today, this evening. You are all wonderful. Patreon members. Let me see if I can find any YouTube members in the chat here. I don't know that I can actually see YouTube members in the chat. I'm going to get to super chats in a minute. I see Ware Pilgrim, who is a YouTube member and a moderator. Thank you. I see a lot of mods in the chat, so I'll shout you out while I see Desert Mantis, Quantum Alchemist is here. Ware Pilgrim, as I said, you are here. So thank you all for your assistance tonight. And okay, I want to just thank there's a new Substack subscriber who pledged today annually, Zulema, okay, or actually I should call you Azalea. Thank you so much. If you pledged during this stream, great. You can become an annual Substack member in the video description below. Annual Patreon members are, of course, encouraged. That is the best place to support, but Substack is great too. So let us now say, so Patreon members, thank you. Substack members, thank you. YouTube members, thank you so much for being here. If you are here, D Knight, friend, D Knight, thank you so much for becoming a member. I really appreciate that, friend. Hope you are well. Conan, $3. Thank you so much for the super sticker. Studio is back. Germany being set up to be blamed for another war. European democracy has led European democracies led their people to a bright future. Yeah, it's absolutely disastrous, Studio. Thanks so much. Will the Museum of Tolerance have a Gaza display? Concerned citizen. Thanks for that. Jim Taleb, thank you for the super sticker. 1984, Sarajevo said, after Soleimani's assassination, Bibi and Trump said they prepared to fight Iran to the last U.S. soldier. Trump wanted to bomb Iran in 2020. General Milley was against. Now Trump could fulfill his promise in early elections. This is what is a concern. It's a real concern, okay? For all of those who are standing for Donald Trump, beware of this fact that generally Trump's political career has been characterized by being surrounded by, if not being one himself, a Iran hawk. I was in China when Soleimani was killed. We were all very worried that a war could ignite. And I was with Cynthia McKinney at the time, and she, of course, has experience with these kind of people, and she was very concerned. So, indeed, very good question. Very good question. I may come back to one or two of these questions, okay? On a light note, I know we're an Attack on Titan fan. I know you are an Attack on Titan. What do you think of the ending now that the series concluded? Wish you well, Danny. Emblem and Fate. I didn't finish it yet. I no spoilers. I have not watched the rest of Attack on Titan. Now that I know there's an ending, my friend who I was watching it with, I need to get back with him and watch the rest. So thank you so much for the super chat. Great information, trusting success. Technology will be at the forefront of World War III. Yes. And then Adadola, thank you so much for the super sticker. So that's what we had today so far. Okay. I can stick around for maybe another 15, 20 minutes if anyone had a different question for me. I don't think I saw anyone on Patreon submit anything. Okay. Oh, while I'm waiting, if you all had any questions or anything like that, none on Patreon. I don't think I had any on Substack. So I can do a quick little Ask Me Anything if you'd like. But if not, I can just head out of here for the night. But I did want to say for announcements, we have a great lineup, okay? Our great lineup coming up for all of you as Netanyahu comes to Congress. So, announcements. Scott Ritter and Dan Kovalik are coming on July 24th. Save the date. That is Wednesday, July 24th, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Dan has written a great book on Palestine called The Case for Palestine, which I will be, of course, promoting during the stream to ensure that that gets noticed, because we need to support our authors as well. Scott Ritter will be coming on, of course, because he has been raging on Netanyahu so rightfully, and he will be coming on to talk about the visits. We will go over the visits, ramifications, what was said, what was done. And of course, we'll get to all the other geopolitical questions too, because both Scott and Dan have traversed Russia, the Donbass, etc. They have a lot of firsthand knowledge. So that should be a great pairing. We'll have a fun night. I said 8:30, I think actually 9 p.m. Eastern. So it's going to be a little bit of a late one for some of those who might be on the other side of the world. But I hope you all can make it. With all that said, I also want to say that the next day I will have Lee Camp and Ben Norton. All right, so we will continue the conversation with Ben Norton from Geopolitical Economy Report, Lee Camp from his own show. Right, I forget what he calls his show now. I feel like it's changed a bit for Lee Camp. Dangerous Ideas. All right, so Dangerous Ideas. Lee Camp. He's been doing it for a long time, comedian, but also just staunch anti-war, anti-imperialist journalist, activist. He will come on with Ben Norton of Geopolitical Economy Report. And we will have another great stream the next day, the 25th, 8:30 p.m. Eastern. So we'll go back to back, and then we will take a little break from streaming for a few days, and then I'll make some more announcements probably the 25th when I know more about something I'm working on, okay? So here we go. So duly noted says, since the cat's out of the bag, Lindsey Graham wants Ukrainian resources. Where does China and Russia stand with a post-Ukraine? This is an interesting question. Where does Russia and China stand with a post-Ukraine? So I'm going to take it that means a world order where maybe Ukraine does not exist as it once did. So that is very much a possibility, right? This whole conflict has led to speculation, legitimate speculation, because it's most likely to occur that, and it already has occurred in many ways, that Ukraine is going to just be split into pieces. That's already happened in some respects. We had Crimea in 2014-15, right, enter the Russian Federation. And then, of course, in 2020, I believe that was 2022, late 2022, 2023. I believe it was late 2022, right? When the Donbass, right, many of the Donbass regions, Zaporozhye, Donetsk, Lugansk were admitted into the Russian Federation. So a lot of Ukraine has already been reabsorbed into the Russian Federation as a demand by the people of that region. And we've seen how China's reacted. We know Russia's stance. Now, it's unclear what the post Ukraine order will look like, the end of Ukraine, the end of the conflict. Ukraine will likely exist in some form. We don't know what form. I don't think Russia will ever say all of Ukraine is now the Russian Federation or call it something else. I don't think the entirety of Ukraine will ever be annexed. I don't think Russia has any interest in Kiev. I just don't. If it did, it would be making more plans toward that end. But I think the post Ukraine order is going to really challenge Russia and China's position for a long time, which has been to advocate for the international law as it stands, which says that countries that are UN, that are participants in the United Nations Charter, that are recognized as independent sovereign states, that they have all these rights, right, self-determination, etc. And so throughout this conflict, well, you can't say Russia's necessarily violated international law given how it has fought. It hasn't fought to topple Ukraine. But if Ukraine were to be toppled, right, if Ukraine were to completely be decimated, it would come under significant fire. And then Russia and China would have to talk about and stand on its business, so to speak, as the kids say these days, and reiterate their position in a new way. They will have to adopt their own framework. They'll have to talk about international law in a manner that is applied to now a much more uh, uh, delicate situation than it is now. Right now, Ukraine is talked about as an independent sovereign state. But what happens when that sovereign state is no longer governable? That is something that is very much possible in the very near future. So yeah, Russia and China have a lot to think about. Their positions, though, I don't think will change. I believe they will continue to promote themselves as kind of the new arbiters of international law, that they will talk about international law as being trampled on during this conflict, and they will talk about how they can behave and act in a manner that will secure the most stable post-Ukraine world order that can be had. We've seen China take the position it wants to be a mediator in peace talks, but it would also be a key mediator in any kind of reconstruction process because, let's be quite honest, China's economic relationship with Ukraine is very good. And of course, we know it's incredible with Russia. So China will operate as an economic and diplomatic mediator for whatever's to come, and China will not interfere with that process. And we know that that process will likely include people needing to be involved, right? People needing to be involved in Ukraine, across the territories, in figuring out what's the best next step. The one issue that we all have to remember and we all have to note here is that Russia and China will not be operating in a vacuum. NATO will be there, right? As much as I would like to say a post-Ukraine order also means the end of NATO, I don't know if that's the case. I don't, again, I'm not talking about post-Ukraine order as Ukraine has been dismantled. I'm talking about the Ukraine conflict ending and Ukraine being whatever position it's going to be in, which I don't think will be a good one. I think it'll be very much destabilized. I think the political system already, we are seeing it crumble. We are seeing Zelensky continue on with martial law. We are seeing the parliament essentially become useless. We see that former pro-Russia opposition members have to come to parliament when they were once banned in order to make it functional. I mean, this is a society that has been destroyed by a war, not of its own doing, because we cannot blame people for the leaders that presided over them. This is, after all, a government that was first instituted under a coup regime. We can't forget that the elections that happened in 2019 were an extension of that coup. No matter how much people might have been bamboozled by Zelensky's rhetoric of peace. It was always fraudulent. So now we have a situation where the government in Ukraine is going to be absolutely in tatters. The military situation for Ukraine is going to be disastrous. NATO is going to be weaker than ever. We're talking about a post-Ukraine order here. And we're talking about a reality. This is not just speculation. This is what's already happening, right? NATO resources are depleted. Germany is cutting their aid to Ukraine in half. Most of the collective West is banking on a forever war that is sustained with the minimal amount of support, no matter how much hubris they may demonstrate in public. So a post-Ukraine order is going to have to contend with what NATO and the United States are going to look like and how they will behave in the face of the biggest defeat in their history. They will never have suffered this kind of defeat. Yes, you could say Vietnam, Afghanistan, Korea. You can go down the line of defeats by the United States or defeats by NATO when it comes to various conflicts and wars that they've waged, whether at the proxy level or the direct intervention level. Syria, you could even say, is a defeat, but they aren't. You cannot measure the kind of defeat that a post-Ukraine order would mean for NATO. It would mean that Russia, a power bigger than many of the former defeats the United States and NATO have faced, it would mean Russia, a power that is leading much more, that is about much more than just Ukraine. It is about a multipolar world. It is about a different world order. It is as if the Soviet Union were to have engaged during the Soviet period in a kinetic conflict with the United States and won that conflict, right? A proxy conflict nonetheless, but one that's kinetic, one that has been compared to World War levels. It is as if that had happened. But now it's happening in the 21st century. Of course, the Russian Federation is a lot different from the Soviet Union. It is not the same kind of social order, political order, economic order. I'm making the comparison in the sense that NATO and the US will have lost to a big power. It will have lost to a power where the defeat cannot be spun. Ukraine is already showing that it is very difficult to spin defeat. They can't even do it for themselves. They're doing it in the Western media. So the point here is that how will NATO respond? We know, and as I said in the beginning of this program and in many programs before this, we know that the United States and NATO can't be trusted, that they have launched nuclear war in the past. They have done some absolutely just monumentally dangerous things in the history of their aggression around the world, their imperial aggression around the world. The U.S. and NATO, right, the United States has used nuclear weapons, and they've both threatened nuclear weapons on various occasions. We always have to remember that when we're talking about the United States, we're also talking about NATO. NATO is not an independent body in any respect. So how will the United States and NATO respond? Will they threaten nuclear war? Will they start a different conflict? Will they try to pull Russia into a different conflict? We don't know, but we know from how NATO and the United States have behaved up until this point that it cannot be taken out of the equation. So Russia and China's position will not change, right? As long as leadership like Vladimir Putin or someone like him, as long as Xi Jinping and the CPC remain in power in China, their position on what it would mean for a post-Ukraine conflict order to emerge is not going to change. They're going to adhere to international law. They're going to try to frame and shape international law around the conditions before them. They're going to promote stability as best they can, reconciliation, reconstruction. But we have to factor in, what will the United States do? What will NATO do? How will they react to defeat? I do not see an empire like the United States and, of course, its NATO arm reacting very well to this. This is why this channel has developed in the way that it has, is because this is the big concern that I've had for so long about the direction of politics, the direction of geopolitics, the direction of the United States as an empire for the last decade plus. And that's only because that's how long I have been able to follow it in my life, the last 10 plus years. which is they're moving toward an unthinkable scenario, a great power conflict that we really haven't seen. Why? Because the prior world wars were really internecine. They were really conflicts between similar world orders. They were not, it was not seen with the same existential light. That's why the United States waited. How long did the US wait to enter World War II? A very long time, because not everyone saw World War II as existential. The Soviets certainly did. The Chinese in the Pacific region certainly saw it as existential. The United States, can't say the United States saw World War II as existential for a very long time until 1941. So, this is the situation we're in. The United States does view its great power conflict with Russia and China as existential. It does view NATO's role, not only in Europe, but also in the Pacific, as existential to its very survival. It's incorrect. The United States could very well go on. There's nothing in its economic order that says that capitalism cannot adjust to new circumstances. The problem is that we're not just talking about crass economic relationships here. We are talking about how these economic relationships have produced an imperial system that is dependent upon war and dependent upon eradicating any alternative to its rule in order to uh, gobble up not just all the market share, not just all the resources, right? This is how we talk often about imperialism, colonialism, right? These expansionist systems, but it's also about ensuring existence, solidifying what cannot be solidified, which is the end of history. That is what the United States is ultimately holding on to. That is what the empire of the United States is holding on to. This myth that its empire, its imperialist order, will somehow live forever. And there's a definite understanding, even if it's not conscious, but I believe it's conscious, from the war makers and the war hawks, that their system, that their leadership over this system is the final stage of this system. And what do I mean by that? It means that there is nothing coming after the US empire. All of the idiots in the collective West, Russia's an empire, it's ridiculous. They're not empires. If they were, Russia would be acting much differently in its own theater of war, Ukraine. China would be acting much differently in the Pacific. They're not empires. They're not trying to be empires. But there is nothing left to replace the United States. Europe is in absolute tatters. None of the vassal states, Israel, Israel, none of these states that depend on the U.S. for its largesse and for their own existence are at all at the level where they could assume global leadership. We know that global leadership is being vied between, is being competed for by Russia, China, and the United States, right? Russia and China on the one hand, the United States on the other. We know that's how the cookie crumbles right now. We know that there is no uh, successor to the U.S. empire, and the U.S. empire knows it. They know when they go down, no one's going to pick them up and make them junior partners like the British. That's not happening. It's over. It's over for the U.S. empire once it loses its economic superiority, once its military superiority has been neutralized, which is fast happening. Fast happening. That's what we're seeing in Ukraine. That's what we're seeing in the Pacific with China. That's what we're seeing in just most of the world. Now we're seeing it in West Asia with Yemen and Ansarallah and the Axis of Resistance, right? So once and politically illegitimate, the people of the world look at the United States as a clown show, as unstable, as violent, as selfish, as narrow. That's how most people look at the United States at this point. Not as a force for good, but a force for war. And so, and when I say most people, I mean the multipolar world. Much of the multipolar world thinks this. So the US empire knows its time is up. So a post-Ukraine order is going to be a disaster for it. It means that it's going to have to scramble to figure out how it factors in, how it's relevant to this particular region. And I believe we can't trust the United States or NATO in that. And China and Russia are going to have to contend with an increasingly violent and increasingly unstable and unhinged U.S. empire. So while a post-Ukraine order would certainly be preferable, peace would be great right now, we know that peace to the U.S. empire means defeat. In many ways, they're not wrong. This was a war they started. They fucked around. They found out. So I don't see any other questions here. All right. So I think I'm just going to head out. How about that? So you heard the announcements, okay? You heard the announcements. I am going to be live with Scott Ritter on the 24th, July 24th. Then I am going to be Scott Ritter and Dan Kovalik. Okay. So 9 p.m. Eastern time, July 24th. That's Netanyahu's visit. Hopefully all the shenanigans will have ended and we have a lot to talk about. Then the next day, Ben Norton and Lee Camp are coming on to continue the conversation about what happened. Also, just get into some what's happening around the world. And we will continue. So Embleman Fate, I said I get his chat. I got a super chat. Did I get a super chat from you, Embleman? Embleman. Yes, I did. I don't know why it's gone. Oh, here it is. Yeah, Embleman. See, I read this. So Embleman's asking. I read your chat. What I think of the end. I didn't watch it yet. So that's the end of that. All right, everybody. I'll see you all again soon, okay? I'll see you all again in about 4 days. 9 p.m. Eastern time here on this channel. Take care. Bye-bye.